So with that, we have questions that I'll simply run through. There's in no particular order. I'll read the question, and then the Congressman will respond accordingly. If there are any questions that cannot be responded to, or otherwise, I'm sure that
I'll do my homework and I'll get back to you.
First question is from Frank Mullen. It's two questions, actually. Funding for education. What is your view?
Well, I think the view that we have to look at in education in the United States of America from a federal level is that as we continue to fund a bigger bureaucracy in Washington, D.C., what has happened to education down here at the local level? We have to invest in education at the local level. And specifically, having taught at Deerfield Beach High School, this is the thing we have to have. We have to make education relevant. We have to move away from teaching kids how to take a test. We have to start giving them critical thinking skills. We have to give them a productive skill by which they can leave that high school, or even start out of middle school. We have to start looking at that. Because what I see happening right now, what's the purpose of learning an isosceles triangle? What's the purpose of learning good subject-verb agreement? What's the purpose of learning how to dissect a frog? And that is why I think in our public school systems, the most important thing we must do is have public-private partnerships down here at the local level. We need to have people that can come in from the private sector. And if they come in from the private sector, then you afford them some type of tax credit as an incentive to do that. That can marry up with teachers and teach these kids, this is what you can do with what the teacher is teaching. Teach them the practical application. And in teaching them the practical application, as you're making good grades, the reward is that, young man, young woman, I want you to come to my business, and over the summer I want you to have an apprenticeship. I want you to have an internship. Because we've got to start developing that talent down here. We should have people from the marine industry, from the finance sector. We should have people from the Sun Sentinel. We should have people from our news stations going into these schools and showing kids this is what you can do with it. Instead, what we do is we sit around at some point in the year, we will cease all instruction, and we will focus on teaching kids how to outsmart a test. We will tell them that you have A, B, C, D. Now, chances are 2 of those are not the right response. So you got to figure out which one is not the right response. Then, based upon that, you're going to have to kind of guess between what you believe is a reasonable response and what you think is the best possible response. And that's what we are doing to our kids. And what's even worse is that we're telling our kids here at the local level that at the age of 16, if you fail the FCAT test, you probably don't have a bright future. And what do you think they do when we tell them that? They quit. And guess what happens then? They end up becoming a burden on the rest of society. I would rather see us invest locally. I would rather see us reduce the bureaucracy of education at the federal government and start getting those resources down to the local level. Pay teachers well. We don't pay teachers well. Support our teachers in the classroom. I can tell you one of the reasons why I decided after 1 year that, I'm just going to pick up and I'm going to go back over to Afghanistan for 2.5 years. Because I figured if I'm going to be in a combat zone, I might as well be on. We have kids that don't respect our teachers. We have kids that are attacking our teachers. Let me tell you something else that ties into education reform. Strengthening the American family. We've got to get parents involved in the education of our children. Too often, parents will come to see me, and the first thing they say is, why do you not like my child? It's not about not liking the child. Here's your child's work. Here's where they're failing. We have to have parents that want to believe that the teachers are there to do the best for their children. Those are the type of things we have to start doing. And when you look at the fact that in the late 1970s, when we created the Department of Education, look at what the Department of Education was as far as personnel and budget in the late 1970s, and then look at what the Department of Education now as far as personnel and budget is. And look at where the standards of education have gone. We have got to have a reform in our education system.
Second part of the question, casinos or not?
That's a state level issue, and I think that that's something that you should be talking to your state rep, George Moriarty, your state senator, Ellen Bogdanoff. I don't think casino gambling is going to be the panacea for the economy here in Florida. I think that what we have to do, and what I can help, is how do we have the right type of tax or regulatory policies so that those closed storefronts, our small businesses, get opened up, so that we can attract more corporations and businesses to come back to the United States, to America. That's my focus, and that's what I want to be able to do. But the decision has to be made from the people at the local level. If you want to have casino gambling, but don't think that that's going to be the panacea. It's going to rectify the economic situation we have down in South Florida.
Next question is from Lillian Karamanian. Who do you support for the Republican candidate for president?
I was hoping that would be like the last question. Look, this is the thing. I don't get involved in food fights, because if you do, you're going to get hit with mashed potatoes. So whoever comes out as the nominee will get my support. But I will tell you this. Florida is going to be very important in that nominating process. By the time you get to Florida here at the end of the month, I think the 31st of January, I believe you'll be down to maybe 4 individuals running for that nomination. I think you'll see a couple others drop out as they come out of South Carolina. And the thing about Florida, Florida is really going to be a true indicator, because Florida is the 4th largest state in the union. And when you look at the diversity from North Florida all the way down to Southern Florida, I think that is more of a an idea, or shows truly the fabric and the culture of the United States of America. 120,000 people in Iowa, that's not reflective of America. And New Hampshire is not reflective of America. I gotta tell you, when I used to look at Bob Newhart, I didn't see too many black people on Bob Newhart's show. So I don't think New Hampshire is going to be very reflective either. I think South Carolina, you're talking about a southern state that's pretty conservative. So once again, it's kind of skewed. But when you look at Florida, Florida is going to be very telltale. Northern Florida is completely different from South Florida. And I think it really is going to be about the issues that are pertinent, our economy, foreclosures, how do we heal this tax and regulatory environment that's killing small businesses. We talked about that at your business, the Diabetic Care Network. That's what we have to talk about, as well as our national security. Remember, 3 of the major combatant command headquarters are in Florida. Think about this. If back in the 60s or whatever, if the Soviet premier was traveling through South America, Central America, and going to Cuba, that'd be pretty big news, what do you think? Ain't nobody talking about Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. And the fact that you have ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile sites, being employed in Venezuela, that's open source intel that any of you can read about. These are very serious times. And when these candidates come down here, you go to a rally, ask them about those things. So no, I'm not getting behind anybody. No endorsements.
The next question is from Marie Kastenbauer. It's actually 3 parts. First part, does the Attorney General have the right to tell a state or a city that they may not demand an official ID to vote?
If you believe in the 10th Amendment, no. And let's be very honest. Where can you go in the United States of America and do something without a picture ID?
Vote.
And we have to protect the integrity of our electoral process and our electoral system. So if states want to have a picture ID, and these states want to provide the funding for people to go and get a picture ID, we have to protect the integrity of our system. That has nothing to do with Jim Crow. And actually, I'm pretty appalled and offended that people would try to compare that to Jim Crow. But then I got to tell you something. The same party that instituted this whole thing about Jim Crow are now the ones talking about Jim Crow. So they need to be very careful about what they're saying.
Second part of the question. I heard the president wants to sell military secrets to Russia. Can he do this or sign a treaty with them without congressional approval?
That's one of the things by the Constitution that the president has the right to be able to do, is to sign treaties. And that's why who is sitting in the White House is very important. And I want to tell you one simple thing. Elections have consequences. You need to think about that between now and November. But yes, the president can sign treaties without anything having to do with Congress.
Third part of the question. The president has used executive privilege to make appointments while Congress is in session recently. Are Republicans calling him on this? And what is his limit of spending when offering money to foreign countries? Example, Brazil.
As a matter of fact, yes, we're going to have a non-binding resolution that will be brought up before the House of Representatives when we get back, and you know, I'm signing on to that about the fact that we have those appointments of the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau and also the National Labor Relations appointments that were made. You know, it's very simple. America is a constitutional republic. America is not an imperial monarchy, and we've got to understand that. We have a system of checks and balances so that neither the legislative, the executive, or the judicial can run roughshod over the other. We have to honor those systems of checks and balances, and we also have to understand the Founding Fathers said that we're co-equal branches within that government. Now, when it comes to funding, once again, the House owns the purse string. We do have to have the Senate that comes in and agrees with us through a conference process as far as the appropriations. When you talk about you know, foreign affairs and foreign aid, you know, the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, right down here in South Florida, Ileana Ross-Layton. So if you have concerns about where we're spending money, definitely shoot her an email. And then also Kate Granger, who is from Texas, is the subcommittee chairperson of the Appropriations Committee for Foreign Affairs. So those are the people. I was very glad that we did get the approval for the money that we sent to Israel, the foreign aid. But I am concerned about the fact that we sent $2 billion of American taxpayer money to Brazil for them to do offshore drilling, and yet we're not doing it ourselves. That's a big concern.
Next question from Bruce Haslam. Again, two parts. What is holding up the law restricting insider trading by Congress?
Call up to the majority leader, Eric Cantor, and tell him that the piece of legislation that was introduced by a freshman member of Congress and I signed on to as a co-sponsor, we want that to come to the floor. You know, this is one of the important things about congressional reform. We cannot have a political elite class in the United States of America. We cannot have a system of career politicians in the United States of America. We need to look at things such as that insider trading. We need to look at things such as the pension system. And I'll be very honest, it took me 22 years to earn a 55% retirement in the United States military. It only takes you 5 years in Congress to get, I believe, a 70 to 75% retirement. We got to change some of those things. And my favorite quote that I always share with people comes from George Mason, 17 June 1788, at the Virginia Ratifying Convention, where he said, "Nothing so strongly impels a man as to regard the interests of his constituents as the certainty of returning to the general mass of the people from whence he was taken, where he must participate in their burdens." The Founding Fathers never meant for us to have career politicians. We got to go back to that.
Second part of the question, is your district threatened by redistricting?
Well, first of all, it ain't my district. Okay, that's what you have to understand. I'm a public servant. I'm here to serve you. It is your district. And so the decision has to be made. Who do you want to see as your congressional representative? I'm not going to Tallahassee. I don't have a lobbyist up there. I don't have a lawyer. I don't have anyone to advocate it. Because I ran to do one thing, to serve the people in Congressional District 22. It is not about being the representative of Republicans or independent Democrats. It's about representing all the constituents and doing the best to ensure your economic security and national security. If you're concerned about the redistricting, then you need to pick up the phone and make a call. And that's all I'm going to say about it.
Next question is from Jim Donnellan. The question is in reference to China. It seems
all night.
It seems this administration and some Republicans are trying to cause troubles between the USA and China. Your comments? Cause troubles. Yes.
We already got trouble between the United States and China. You know, look, the debt of the United States of America is approaching $16 trillion. 47% of that debt is held by foreign nations. 28% of our debt is held by China. The Soviet Union did not collapse militarily. The Soviet Union collapsed economically. And some people study history and study trends. And so what the Chinese came to understand once they got control of Hong Kong is that you can use capitalism as a tool to defeat other countries. Because your economic security is even more important sometimes than your military security. And so what China has done, based upon the trade imbalance, based upon that we want to have these cheap goods and we keep sending, millions of dollars of our money to them. Ships come over here full. They don't go back to China in the same manner. That trade imbalance is leading to them having the largest blue water navy in the next 8 years and a strategic air force that could match the United States Air Force. This latest fighter that they rolled out, if you look at it, there are many similarities to the F-22 Raptor. When you understand that we are in a cyber war with China right now to the point where the United States military had to bring out a new command called U.S. Cyber Command. We're already in trouble with China. Why do you think North Korea can continue to be as belligerent as they were? And you better be concerned about a 28-year-old four-star general. It took me 22 years to get to lieutenant colonel, so this guy must be sharp. But if you are the new leader of a gang, and you're the youngest new leader of a gang, what do you have to do? You got to prove yourself. Every time North Korea wants to do something, being a few years ago, they sunk a South Korean naval vessel, killed 42 South Korean sailors. They fired artillery on the South Korean island. And what did we do? Nothing. China has their back. China is looking to extend their Pacific Rim hegemonic dominance. When was the last time an Asian nation invested in growing their strategic naval power and their strategic air power, and they were in search of raw materials? Thank you.
The next question is from Judith and Wayne Jones. I suspect this may have been addressed in your PowerPoint. However, perhaps you can indulge these fine people. It's in reference to the national debt. When will the interest exceed our gross domestic product?
We're there.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 days ago, we hit 101%. That's just straight looking at our debt to our GDP. But like I said, when you throw in the unfunded mandates of this country, then you talk about an even greater debt to GDP ratio. Remember, the last time this happened was World War II. And that's the situation in which we find ourselves.
Next question is from Roger Keller, or perhaps Kellett. Kellett. Will John Bonner be replaced with a leader willing to take on all the silliness in Congress and the executive branch?
I don't know. I know that what has to happen, and I had a good interview today with the Hill newspaper. The Republicans on Capitol Hill have to come together and figure out the direction they're going to go on. What happened in December, where we passed a piece of legislation to extend something for a year, and the Senate Republicans come back and say, 2 months, we can't continue that way. We got to be unified in our message of who we are. And the leadership needs to bring us all together. They need to talk to us.
Next question is from a Vietnam veteran, 1965 to 1966.
Thanks for your service, wherever you go.
The big red one. I'm not sure what that means exactly.
If you're going to be one, you got to be a big red one. No mission too difficult, no sacrifice too great, duty first. I served with a big red one in Desert Shield, Desert Storm as a young captain.
Alan, this is from Alan Kruthamer. Hope I got that right. Kruthamer, perhaps? How long do you feel it would be to stay in Afghanistan? And how do you feel our military dollars are being spent?
Let me tell you, I think that we have this whole 21st century battlefield wrong. We have to move away from nation building and occupation style warfare. That's not how you're going to win. Furthermore, you just drain your economic resources. You're not going to bring democracy to people who are still fighting over water rights. But what we have to come up with is a strategic vision, and we have to also recognize that there is an enemy out there, and how do we keep them from getting to their goals and objectives? And that's why when I sit back and I look at this, we've got to look at those geographical AORs, and we've got to look at where this enemy is and the potential threats for like the next 15 to 20 years. And we have to start developing what is the requirements, the capability and capacity for a military to be able to engage, deter, and strike. Not occupy. Engage, deter, and strike. 4 strategic imperatives. You have to be able to deny this enemy sanctuary. You don't want him to establish himself in training camps and things of that nature. Second thing you have to do is you have to cut off his flow of men, material, and resource support. That's why energy independence is so important. Third thing, you got to win the information operations war. They are promulgating their ideology all across the internet. You got to shut that down. And the last thing, you have to cordon him off so you reduce his sphere of influence. If they're out in the desert in the middle of Yemen, that's fine. But we have to reduce their ability to extend that beyond the desert of Yemen. I'm concerned. I mean, look what happened over in Tampa this week. And you're going to continue to see these onesie-twosie type of things happen here in the United States of America or wherever. So I think what we need to do is go back to the drawing board and look at how we define this enemy. Radical Islamic totalitarianism. And how do we structure a military that is going to be able to engage, deter, and strike them? This battlefield is totally different from anything that we've ever seen before. When I was in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, we were on one side, they were on the other side, they wore uniforms, you know, we met them in the open desert and we kicked their tail. 12 years later, when I returned back to Iraq, nobody was in uniform. And they were just hiding wherever. And even worse, September 11, 2001 showed that that battlefield is also right here in the United States of America. So we got to change the mentality by which we fight. And also that's part of your economic security, because you cannot waste your resources like what we're doing right now. So with Afghanistan, you know, 2014, we're going to completely pull out. I got it, but then what's next? That doesn't mean that the enemy goes away. The most important thing that I think the president and all of us must recognize when you're talking about warfare and national security, the enemy has a vote. Just because you don't want to go somewhere and fight does not mean that he's not going to go somewhere and fight. And last thing, there are only 2 ways that you end the war. You win or lose. It's not you saying, we're not playing anymore, so we're going to leave. That's not how you do it. Karl von Clausewitz said very simply in his similar book on strategy, on war. War is about the imposition of your will upon another. That's what it's about.
Next question is from Andrew and Irene Ribado. What are your plans for jobs, health care, and Social Security issues?
Okay. Well, first of all, I will tell you, as far as jobs, okay, you can go to jobs.gop.gov, and you can see right here, 25 to 28 pieces of legislation, bipartisan, that are passed in the House of Representatives that are sitting on the desk of Harry Reid, that talk about tax policies and regulatory policies that can stimulate economic growth here in the United States of America. It's not about stimulus spending. It's about simply giving the right type of policies by which our job creators can grow. And that's what we have to get back to. As far as health care, it's very simple. The Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act is already failing the American people. One of the last hearings we had back in December was in the Small Business Committee on the regulation and oversight. The medical loss ratio, if you want to look that up, that's hidden in the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. It's destroying our independent small business insurance brokers. And in turn for doing that, it's affecting our small businesses who are depending upon them to be able to work those insurance issues. And it's putting those folks out of business. So therefore, you have less and less folks that are out there providing those insurance policies. It's being concentrated in the hands of a few, and that is why, since January of 2009 to today, insurance premiums in the United States of America on average have gone from $3,354 to close to $4,200. Now, in January of 2013, when the healthcare law fully kicks in from 2013 to 2018, if you want 159 new government agencies and bureaucracies, if you want 16,000 new IRS agents, if you want 11 new taxes, if you want $500 billion of cuts to Medicare, and if you want an unelected panel of bureaucrats, 15, that will decide the payment schemes and levels for Medicare, that's what's going to happen next January of 2013. What we have to do with healthcare, you talk to any doctor, he will tell you, the biggest driver of cost, tort reform. Catastrophic litigation. That's what's killing them. You know, it's interesting when you talk about trial lawyers and what's happening. How many people are familiar with this hazing case up at Florida A&M University? Do you know that there's a lawyer that is actually going to bring forth a lawsuit against the bus company? That's what's driving up costs in so many areas, especially in healthcare. What we also have to do is open up the ability for the American people to take over shopping for insurance policies for themselves. We have drawn you down into a box state by state, and that's killing folks. When you look at the competitive bidding that's coming out in Medicare, it's putting people like this gentleman here out of business who runs a diabetic care network, providing diabetic devices for people here. We're doing everything that is destroying our healthcare system. Health savings accounts, a great way to take a target amount of your finances and earmark it over for your personal routine health practices or whatever. We're taxing health savings accounts instead of allowing Americans to be able to use that. Those are the type of free market solutions we can get back to. Now, if you want to keep your kid on your insurance policy to 26, it's America, that's your choice. I believe in us having that coverage for pre-existing conditions, absolutely. But 159 new government agencies will destroy the healthcare system in the United States. As far as Social Security, in 1950, you had 16.5 Americans working for every recipient of Social Security. From 1950 to today, you only have 3. And per month, you got about 10,000 baby boomers that are retiring. If you don't get Americans back working, if you continue to cut the payroll tax, it's a matter of time. You're undercutting Social Security. There is no such thing as a lockbox anymore, folks. That was raided long before I got to Washington, D.C. We got to take those funds, instead of giving Americans cheap political gimmicks, take those funds and get it back into that lockbox and restore Social Security.
The next question is from Jack Gerber. How does the health care package you propose for Medicare compare to the health care package you have for members of the U.S. Congress? Why should there be a difference?
Well, first of all, there isn't a difference. If you want, I can pull out my insurance card. I pay a premium to Blue Cross Blue Shield, just like everybody else on my staff. And I also do have TRICARE coverage because in 22 years that I served in the United States military, I kind of earned that. Unfortunately, the promise that was made to me as a military retiree that I would not have to pay for that health coverage, I do pay for that now. And part of what President Obama is proposing is that veterans will have to pay even more on their health care benefits. So, you know, I think that we need to get those things in line. Most important thing is that we cannot have this expanded government bureaucracy when you talk about dealing with health care in the United States of America. So I pay a Blue Cross Blue Shield premium just like anybody else.
Next question is from Robert Betterell. What would you do about Guantanamo? And I presume you mean Guantanamo Bay. Yes?
Well, considering the fact last year I did have an opportunity to go down to Guantanamo Bay, and I will tell you this, I would change it from a 5-star hotel to a true detaining facility. When my wife does allow me to look at TV, they have, I think, like over 21 different cable TV channels and everything like that. When I walked into their area, there were piles of food that they hadn't even gotten to eat. They have their own personal room. You know, I don't even have my own personal room in my house. So I think that you know, we need to get these people off the battlefield and understand this: the rate of recidivism for them going back onto the battlefield is high. What you should be very concerned about is that right now the United States of America is in negotiations with the Taliban to release 5 to 6 Afghan Taliban from Guantanamo Bay to show good faith to the Taliban so that they will negotiate peace with us in Afghanistan. Now, those of you who were here a year ago when I gave this town hall, I didn't have this much gray hair. But it's stuff like that that drives me crazy. Guantanamo Bay needs to stay. Get them off the battlefield until they stop trying to kill us.
Next question is from Captain Paul H. Lalicata, 4th Sicilian Grenadier. I think that's what that says.
Buongiorno, come va? Dove? Grazie.
I'm going to have to edit this question a little bit only because, unfortunately, I'm unable to decipher part of it. So, the balance of the question says, do you have vice presidential aspirations 2012?
I don't, look, I did not know what my life was going to be when I retired down here in 2004. I don't know what God has planned for me. But if someone wants me to serve my country in a higher capacity, I'm going to pray about it. Just the same as when people ask me to run for Congress, I'm going to talk to my wife and my daughters about it. We will make the best possible decision for our country, and we will make the best possible decision as well as for our family. And so that's what I would seek to do. But I don't think I'm on any list. I don't think I'm being considered. Okay, follow-up question.
What I said was, I had studied Latin for 2 years. One thing was Caesar, that Gaul divided into 2 parts, and the divide and conquer. Divide the black folk, but the white, back then,
I don't know if there are people smart enough to think that way. Well, like I said, I don't know what the future is like.
It's actually my vision that's very, very bad. Next question is from Simon Shevlin, and it's in reference to Israel. Do the Jewish know about the St. Louis boat for 1939? And I'm reading this as best I can.
Oh yeah. That was the boat that was out there floating, and actually President Roosevelt would not allow those Jewish refugees to land here in the United States. That was a very tragic thing in the history of our country.
The next question is from Kitty Kessler. It's in reference to open borders illegals. And she also states that she does not want to see Roe versus Wade repealed. And the balance of the question is in reference to Social Security Medicare, which I believe we've already addressed. So I'm going to assume the question is in reference to your feelings, comments on open borders and illegals, as in illegal immigrants.
Study what happened in Rome.